International efforts to secure a ceasefire in Gaza continue. The United Nations Security Council is expected to vote on a draft resolution that's later today, despite wide expectations of another US veto, what would be its third, stemming its adoption. This latest text, put forward by Algeria, demands an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and the release of all hostages held by Hamas. Like previous iterations, it also doesn't condemn the militant group's October 7th assault. The United States has voiced opposition to the draft over concerns that it could jeopardize ongoing truce talks. It's proposed its own draft resolution, which for the first time calls for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza on the condition that all hostages are released. It also urges Israel against any major ground offensive into Rafah, warning of civilian casualties. Israel has been threatening to move into the city, one of the last areas untouched by its ground troops. That's if hostages held by Hamas are not returned by Ramadan, which begins on the 10th of March. More than 1 million Palestinians shelter there, with the region also serving as a key entry point for aid. As fighting intensifies and international diplomacy shows signs of faltering, truce talks are continuing. Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh has arrived in Egypt for discussions with Egyptian officials on the conflict. Mediators from the United States, Egypt and Qatar have been trying to secure a deal for weeks now, but with little progress. For more, Sarah Coates joins us. She's live for us from Tel Aviv. Sarah, the UN Security Council widely expected to shut down yet another draft resolution later. Can we expect more headway with the US-led version?
Hello there, Dawn. As you mentioned, two competing resolutions. The one that you were speaking about, put forward by Algeria, that was around 2 weeks ago, with the United States, as you said, expected to veto that resolution, putting forward a draft of its own. And the language in this is very significant, given that it is the first time that the United States, Israel's closest ally, has actually used the word ceasefire. This would be a temporary ceasefire, the United States says, as soon as practicable. Also in this draft is that Israel must not redraw the borders of Gaza. We've been seeing construction ongoing around the area of Gaza, trying to create a buffer zone. Also included is that Israel should not conduct a military operation into Rafah, where more than 1.4 million Palestinians are sheltering, a place that was also declared until now as a safe zone. So what we can expect is discussion on this draft put forward by the United States today. It will need 9 votes to pass. It will need no vetoes. So this is certainly a very significant move, as I said, by the United States there, Israel's closest ally. Now, also happening today, we do know that a senior Hamas delegation, including the leader of Hamas's political bureau, Ismail Haniyeh, they have just landed in Cairo for talks with senior Egyptian officials on ways to end this war and potentially also a prisoner swap deal. And we can also reveal that the US's Mideast envoy, Brett McGurk, he is also set to touch down in Egypt tomorrow. He'll possibly be joining in these talks as the US really tries to find a way before that Ramadan deadline, as you mentioned, that the US, that Israel rather, has set out for this potential operation into Gaza. The US really pushing Israel, trying to find some sort of a deal before that deadline.
Well, as this pressure grows on Israel to secure a truce deal, we are hearing from within Israel itself, very notably, the pressure there growing just as much as outside of the country. Can you give us the latest on that?
Intense pressure here in Israel, Dawn, over the weekend and over the last few days, really. Thousands upon thousands of people have been taking to the streets, not just here in Tel Aviv, but also in Jerusalem and right outside the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's private residence in Caesarea. They are calling for a number of things. They want a deal to be done now at whatever the cost to bring these 130 or so hostages back to Israel. They're also calling for early elections, saying that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, he must step down. Now, many people were arrested during these demonstrations, as I said, right around the country, turning violent, people breaking through barriers and clashing with police. But they say they are not going to let up until these people are returned home safely. Now, a lot of this really broke out after a video was released just a couple of days ago of this widely recognised family, the Bibas family. That's the family of two little boys, their mother and father. They're both redhead children. They were abducted from southern Israel back on October 7, taken into Gaza, and the IDF has now released vision of them inside the strip. They're being bundled into a car, covered in some sort of a rug, with their whereabouts still unknown. So this has really, once again, ignited these protests here in Israel. And there has been a bit of a shift, actually, from Netanyahu's Likud party. The culture minister, Miki Zohar, he's actually just come out earlier today to speak out against this expected military operation into Rafah, saying that any incursion by Israeli forces into Rafah would seriously have a detrimental effect to the remaining hostages.
Sarah, thank you for that update. Sarah Coates there, live for us in Tel Aviv.